He's my son. You can't take him from me." Sarah's voice cracked as she faced Tom, her ex-husband, whose smirk cut through her like a blade. He leaned casually against the doorframe of her tiny apartment, his eyes glinting with cold amusement. "Try me," Tom said, his tone as sharp as his tailored suit. "A judge is going to take one look at your life and hand Daniel over to me. You've got nothing, Sarah. No money, no stability. Just give up now, and I might let you see him on weekends." Sarah's heart pounded, her breath shallow. Tom wasn't bluffing. He had the resources, the connections, and the nerve to follow through on his threats. But one thought burned brighter than her fear: she couldn't lose Daniel. Sarah Hayes had always known how to fight. Growing up in foster care, she learned early that survival was about grit, resilience, and finding light in the darkest places. But nothing had prepared her for the battle she now faced, the battle to keep her 6-year-old son, Daniel, safe and in her arms. Their life was far from perfect. Sarah's days started before sunrise, juggling 2 jobs to pay for their modest 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. The furniture was secondhand, and the walls were thin, but the space was filled with warmth. Daniel's laughter echoed through the tiny kitchen, his drawings covered the fridge, and the scent of pancakes on Saturday mornings made it feel like a home. "Mom, why don't we have a car like the other kids?" Daniel asked one evening, his big brown eyes full of curiosity. Sarah paused, setting down a plate of macaroni and cheese. "Because we're saving up for something even better," she said with a smile. "One day, we'll have a car and a big house. You'll see." Daniel grinned, his faith in her unwavering. "Okay. Can we get a car that's blue? I like blue." His innocence filled her chest with a bittersweet ache. She didn't want him to see the struggle, the exhaustion in her eyes, or the growing stack of overdue bills on the counter. Daniel deserved better, and every sacrifice she made was for him. Sarah's routine had been predictable, even comforting, until the day Tom walked back into her life. She was at the diner where she worked her morning shifts, balancing a tray of coffee mugs, when the doorbell jingled. Her heart stopped. Tom stood in the doorway, his tall frame and sharp suit making him look like he didn't belong among the chipped countertops and worn stools of the diner. He smiled, a cold, knowing smirk that made Sarah's stomach churn. Well, he said, sliding onto a bar stool. "If it isn't Sarah Hayes. Long time no see." Sarah set the tray down, her hands trembling. "What are you doing here, Tom?" "Relax," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "I'm just here to talk." "I don't have anything to say to you," she shot back, her voice firmer than she felt. Tom leaned forward, his smile fading into something more menacing. "I've been thinking. I want to see my son." "No," Sarah said immediately, her heart racing. "You don't get to walk back into his life after 6 years and decide you're a father now." His smirk returned. "We'll see about that." A week later, Sarah found a thick envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a court summons. Tom was suing for full custody of Daniel. Sarah spent the next week in a fog of panic and disbelief. The thought of losing Daniel was unbearable, but the reality of fighting Tom in court felt equally impossible. He had money, connections, and a lawyer whose name alone made Sarah's stomach turn. She tried to focus, spending late nights poring over legal websites, jotting down notes, and gathering every piece of evidence she could find to prove she was a good mother. On the surface, she had plenty to show: Daniel's glowing report cards, photos of their trips to the park, letters from his teachers praising her involvement. But doubt crept in as she read horror stories about custody battles where the parent with fewer resources lost, no matter how much they loved their child. One evening, after Daniel had gone to bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, her head in her hands. She felt the weight of the fight pressing down on her, suffocating her. "You can't do this alone," a voice inside her whispered. But who could she turn to? The answer came in the form of Matt, a stranger who approached her one night at the courthouse library. "You're Sarah Hayes, right?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Sarah looked up, startled. "Who's asking?" "My name's Matt," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "I know what you're going through." Sarah frowned, instinctively on guard. "What do you mean?" Matt hesitated, running a hand through his graying hair. "A few years ago, I was in your position. Lost my daughter in a custody battle. Made some bad choices, didn't fight hard enough. I've regretted it every day since. I don't want to see someone else go through that." Sarah studied him, unsure of his intentions. He was in his 40s, with tired eyes and a slight limp, as if life had taken its toll on him. "Why would you want to help me?" she asked, her voice softer now. Matt's gaze dropped to the table. "Because I know what it's like to lose the most important thing in your life," he said quietly. "And if I can help you keep your son, maybe I can make up for what I couldn't do for my daughter." Matt wasn't a lawyer, but he knew the system well enough to guide Sarah. Over the next few weeks, he became her unexpected ally, helping her organize her evidence, prepare her statements, and practice how to present herself in court. "You can't just tell them you're a good mom," Matt said one evening as they sat in her apartment, papers spread across the table. "You have to show them. Concrete examples. Times you went above and beyond for Daniel." Sarah nodded, scribbling notes. "Like the time I worked an extra shift to buy his school supplies." "Exactly," Matt said. "And get a character letter from his teacher if you can. Judges love that stuff." As they worked together, Sarah learned more about Matt's story. He had once been a successful contractor, married with a young daughter named Lily. But after a car accident left him with chronic pain, he turned to pills, and his addiction spiraled out of control. His wife left, taking Lily with her, and when the custody battle came, Matt was too broken to fight. "Helping you fight for Daniel," Matt said one night, "feels like a second chance. Like maybe I can make up for what I couldn't do for Lily." Sarah's gratitude was overwhelming. For the first time since the court summons arrived, she felt like she wasn't alone. "Let me know if you'd like me to continue with more courtroom drama, deeper emotional stakes, and the climactic resolution of Sarah's fight for her son." The first day of the custody hearing felt like stepping into a battlefield. Sarah walked into the courtroom clutching her worn messenger bag, her knuckles white. Tom was already there, sitting with his lawyer at the opposite table, his expensive suit and relaxed demeanor making him look every bit the confident, capable father he was pretending to be. The judge entered, a stern woman with sharp eyes who took her seat without a word. Sarah's lawyer leaned over, whispering, "Just stay calm and speak from the heart when it's your turn." She nodded, though her heart pounded so hard she was certain everyone in the room could hear it. Tom's lawyer went first, delivering an opening statement that painted Tom as a responsible, devoted father who had been unfairly excluded from his son's life. He spoke about Tom's stable career, his spacious home, and his newfound dedication to reconnecting with Daniel. "Mr. Hayes regrets the time he's lost with his son," the lawyer concluded, his voice smooth as silk. "But he is ready to provide Daniel with the love, stability, and financial security he deserves." Sarah's stomach churned. Every word felt like a blow, a carefully crafted narrative designed to erase the years of struggle and sacrifice she had endured for Daniel. When it was her lawyer's turn, he stood and delivered a straightforward defense. "My client, Sarah Hayes, has been Daniel's sole caregiver for the past 6 years. She has provided a stable, loving home, despite significant financial challenges. She has prioritized Daniel's education, emotional well-being, and safety. This case isn't about which parent has more money, it's about which parent has consistently been there for Daniel." The words gave Sarah a flicker of hope, but she knew this was only the beginning. The next few days were grueling. Tom's lawyer called several witnesses to the stand, including a former co-worker of Sarah's from the diner. "She's a hard worker," the woman admitted, fidgeting nervously under the judge's gaze. But, there were times she seemed stressed. Distracted, you know. Like she had a lot on her plate. Sarah's lawyer countered swiftly, asking, "And did you ever see her neglect her responsibilities?" The woman shook her head. "No. She always did her job." Still, the implication was clear. Tom's team wanted to portray Sarah as overwhelmed, barely keeping her head above water. When Sarah took the stand, her nerves felt like a live wire. She gripped the edges of the podium, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I'm not perfect," she began, her gaze sweeping the courtroom. "I've had hard days. I've worked long hours. But everything I do is for my son. Daniel is my world. I've been there for every milestone, his first steps, his first day of school, every parent-teacher conference. I've done my best to give him a life where he feels loved and safe." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "I may not have the money or the resources that Tom does, but I have love, and I've built a home where my son can thrive." The courtroom was silent as she stepped down, her hands trembling. Tom's carefully constructed facade began to crack during his own cross-examination. "Mr. Hayes," Sarah's lawyer began, "can you explain why you waited 6 years to pursue custody of your son?" Tom shifted in his seat, his polished smile faltering. I wasn't ready before. But I am now." "So, during those 6 years, Sarah was solely responsible for Daniel's care, correct?" Tom's jaw tightened. "Yes, but..." "And during that time, did you make any attempt to support Daniel financially?" Tom's face reddened. "No, but that's not the point." The lawyer's tone remained calm. "What is the point, Mr. Hayes?" Tom's temper flared. "The point is, he's my son. I shouldn't have to explain myself to anyone." The judge's sharp gaze didn't miss a thing, and Sarah saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. That evening, Matt showed up at Sarah's apartment, carrying a folder. "I found something," he said, his tone urgent. Inside were emails and text messages that painted a damning picture of Tom's motives. One message, sent to a coworker, complained about how Tom's lack of a family image was holding back his career. Another mentioned that pursuing custody would be a good look for him at work. Sarah's heart raced. This could change everything, she said, hope rising in her chest for the first time in weeks. The final day of the hearing was the longest. Both sides presented their closing arguments, and the judge asked pointed questions about the new evidence Matt had uncovered. Tom's lawyer tried to downplay the messages, but the damage was done. Tom's true intentions were laid bare. When the judge finally spoke, her words were measured and deliberate. "After reviewing all evidence and testimony, it is clear that the child's best interests lie with the parent who has provided consistent care, love, and stability. Custody is awarded to Sarah Hayes." Sarah's breath caught. She felt tears streaming down her face as relief washed over her. Across the room, Tom sat stiffly, his face a mask of anger. That night, Sarah held Daniel close, his small arms wrapped around her neck. "I love you, Mom," he whispered, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "I love you too, baby," Sarah replied, her tears soaking into his hair. Matt stayed for dinner, his usual quiet demeanor softened by a rare smile. "You did it," he said. "No," Sarah said, her voice full of gratitude. "We did it." In the months that followed, Sarah joined the advocacy group that had helped her during the trial. She shared her story with other parents, offering guidance and hope to those facing similar battles. Matt became a regular part of their lives, finding purpose in helping others and forging a bond with Sarah and Daniel that felt like family. Their lives weren't perfect, but they were full of love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future, a future they had fought for together. Months turned into years, and life began to settle into a new rhythm for Sarah and Daniel. The scars of the custody battle slowly faded, replaced by a quiet sense of triumph and security. Their modest apartment remained their home, but it now felt more alive, filled with hope and the sound of laughter. Daniel thrived in school, his natural curiosity and joyful energy making him a favorite among his teachers and classmates. Sarah poured her heart into her work, not only at her job but in her newfound role as a mentor for parents facing similar custody battles. Through the advocacy group, Sarah began leading workshops and sharing her story. Parents came to her for advice, drawn by her empathy and determination. She taught them how to gather evidence, navigate the legal system, and, most importantly, stay resilient in the face of overwhelming odds. One evening, after a particularly emotional workshop, Matt approached her, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said, leaning against the doorway, "you're doing something amazing here. These people, they look up to you." Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just want to make sure no one feels as alone as I did when this all started. Everyone deserves a chance to fight for their family." Matt nodded, his gaze distant. "You've inspired me, you know. I've been thinking, maybe it's time I reach out to Lily." Sarah's eyes softened. Matt rarely spoke about his daughter, the pain of losing her still raw despite the years. "Do you think you're ready?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But if I've learned anything from you, it's that it's never too late to try." Matt spent weeks crafting a letter to Lily. He wanted to get it right, to say everything he'd held back for years, to explain his mistakes without making excuses, and to let her know how much he missed her. When he finally sent it, he told Sarah, his hands shaking as he dropped the envelope into the mailbox. Weeks passed with no response, and Matt began to lose hope. But one evening, as he sat in his small apartment, the phone rang. "Hello?" he answered, his voice cautious. "Dad?" The voice on the other end was hesitant, but unmistakable. Matt's heart clenched. "Lily? Is that you?" "It's me," she said softly. "I got your letter." Tears filled Matt's eyes as they talked for hours, their words weaving a fragile bridge over the years of silence. Sarah's work with the advocacy group continued to expand. She collaborated with other parents to create a resource center, offering free legal aid, emotional support, and childcare services for those fighting custody battles. They called it the Safe Harbor, a name that reflected the sanctuary it provided. Matt joined her efforts, his experience and newfound hope making him a valuable mentor. Together, they built a community that thrived on resilience, compassion, and the shared belief that no one should have to fight alone. One day, as Sarah stood in the resource center, watching parents and children laughing together, she felt a deep sense of peace. Daniel ran up to her, clutching a crayon drawing of a house surrounded by stick figures labeled Mom, Me, and Matt. "Look, Mom. It's us," he said proudly. Sarah knelt down, hugging him tightly. "It's perfect, baby." Years later, Daniel would remember those moments as the foundation of his life. He grew up with a fierce understanding of love, sacrifice, and the strength it took to protect the people who mattered most. Sarah, too, carried those lessons with her, watching her son grow into a kind, determined young man. And though the journey had been filled with pain and uncertainty, it was also filled with triumph and hope, a testament to the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. In the end, Sarah's fight wasn't just for Daniel. It was for every parent who had ever felt powerless, every child who deserved to feel loved, and every family willing to fight for their future. Thank you so much for watching this video and taking the time to explore this fascinating story with us. If you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, and God bless us all.